All right, guys, we are back. It's another exciting Taylor Tuesday. Thank you for coming to hang out. It means a lot. Um, I think we have a cool show. I think we have something kind of cool to talk about. I got a couple of cool things to talk about, which I've been excited. Lots going on in the world with Twitter, which I kind of don't want to talk very much about, but I think that we're unfortunately going to get in the weeds. But yeah, I thought there'd be a fun opportunity to kind of take a look at what's going on in a space, sort of history repeating itself, if you will. And I thought I'd start off tonight's Tech Talk by telling a little bit of a story and maybe about myself, about my background, about some cool things that I was, got to get my hands on and what it felt like to be a part of that technology at the time. And when I first moved to Toronto back in 2009, I started working at a telecommunications company, cell phone provider. And this is right when this hot new phone had just dropped. It was the BlackBerry 9700. Um, Previous Blackberries had like a little mechanical ball to scroll with, which was great. But this is the first time it just used a little touch sensor. This was like the hottest BlackBerry at the time. And we sold it and happened to have a closet full of them. And I can safely say that over the course of my career, I've handled over like 3,000 of these phones. I've probably inserted more SIM cards than I care to remember. I've copied contacts and profiles. Like I've had stacks of these phones in my drawers at work. And it was truly a phenomenon to have like this device kind of out in the wild, because I remember being able to write very, like, I work in IT. When we're responding at a particular technical issue, you can't just be like, yeah, okay, oh, all right, cool, see you later, bye, right? There's a lot of typing, there's a lot of talking, there's a lot of technical jargon you need to get out. And I always found it like super simple on the BlackBerry physical keyboard just to like hammer that stuff out. And I mean, it was the gold standard. It was interesting because it kind of came out of nowhere. Like Blackberries just took the market by storm. Everyone had them. Celebrities, people in government. It was sort of like the de facto, like, highest security option that you could kind of get in the world. And it's a great device. They were the pinnacle of innovation. And then something happened. They got to a point in their sort of reign in which they kind of just sat back on their laurels, and they thought they could just continue with the status quo. And unfortunately, they got innovated out of the market they kind of helped create by companies like Apple, Samsung, and Android in general. And so history seems to be repeating itself again, just in a completely different space. And though some of the dynamics are definitely different, it's the same story. We see Netflix and kind of their fall from grace in the streaming space. Like when I first got Netflix, it was quite the service. It had tons of awesome content, had a great catalog. I find that some of the user experience changes that they've made over the years make it more difficult to actually just go through the catalog of things. And I don't really want an algorithm to feed me what I want to watch. I literally want to, like, much like I used to go to a video store and like walk into like a Blockbuster or a jumbo video and go through the aisles, and I want to look at all the titles and say no, 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 oh, that might be interesting, right? That's my selection process. And so with like that leaving Netflix and a whole bunch of other things, like them just not having like as much good content anymore, a lot of their original content just kind of like fucking sucks. They're another company who like completely fundamentally changed the world in terms of the dynamics of streaming and making it more acceptable. Sort of being the good guy, or like the golden torch holder of like, hey, we want to make streaming cheap and accessible. We want to have an awesome catalog of stuff. To the market becoming extremely fractured, and now basically everything's just kind of like cable again. I gotta buy three different streaming packages just to cover off sort of the swath of stuff that I want to watch, which wasn't necessarily the case when Netflix first launched. They were kind of an all a one-stop shop, if you will, for this stuff. So anyway, I thought it'd be a fun opportunity to go back and kind of look at the story of BlackBerry, compare that to what's going on in Netflix, and talk a little bit about like what is innovation, because a lot of what's bumming me out about tech right now is you have a lot of tech bros and tech sisses as well who are just like, oh, we're going to change the world and this technology is super innovative, it's never been done before. It's just like, it's a lot of reskinning of old ideas. There is little technology that is actually truly fundamental and innovative in the sense of being like truly world changing. And that's so we're gonna watch a video on the original iPhone. We're gonna watch a video on BlackBerry. There's another really awesome, and you guys, if you're not stoked on the phone stuff and the Netflix shit, we will be getting to some really cool content with this AI Dale 2. I was just reading about this, and I'm so glad that Cold Fusion did a video on it as well. It's essentially an AI where you tell it, like, draw me a picture of an elephant taking a dog for a walk, and it will produce that image for you pretty much lickety split. And it can do it in different versions and different styles, and it's pretty creepy. So anyway, there's some really fun AI stuff we're going to get into, a whole bunch of space stuff, some fun, weird stuff in the crypto news. We may get into the Twitter conversation if chat is looking to have it. Great video with Nicole Proroth on the weapons of cyber war. That's more towards like the end of the episode. We'll see if we get there. But anyway, lots of good stuff to go over. So let's kick it off with my boy Cold Fusion. Dagogo is the goat of this channel. He provides me with a lot of great stuff to watch and talk about with you guys. So we'll just get this kicked off and hopefully not blow anyone's ears.
Hi, welcome to another Cold Fusion video. The story of BlackBerry epitomizes the tech industry. Meteoric rises and catastrophic falls. Disruptive technology changes the market landscape so quickly and drastically that it both creates and swallows billion-dollar companies. BlackBerry went from almost 20% of global mobile market share to almost zero in a matter of a few short years. Let's take a look at the rise and fall of BlackBerry.
And sorry, just like another thing that I want to say is like, I watched this fall, like each device that came out after the 9700, in my humble opinion, again, this is just using them all and having, a staff of 1,600 people, like a fleet of phones out there that you're just constantly getting back and supporting. Out of all of the all BlackBerries I've ever got my hands on, the 9700 is the GOAT. It was the absolute, like, you could run over with a truck, you could kick it downstairs, you could just do horrific things to this phone and it would still work. And even if it wouldn't turn on, like, sometimes you could still get your contacts out of it, which is always incredible. So great device, not nearly as much like cloud storage and backup stuff. But anyway, as BlackBerry introduced more versions of this phone, they just got worse. They were not focusing on what made them awesome and what made they started really. Anyway, I'll let the video get to it, but yeah, each phone after this one was progressively worse and worse until their demise.
You're watching Cold Fusion TV.
To start the BlackBerry history, we have to go back to the 1980s in Canada. BlackBerry originated in Canada as a company called Research in Motion, or RIM for short. In 1984, two engineering students, Mark Lazaridis and Douglas Freggin, start Research in Motion. Early on, the company worked on wireless communications network technology. In 1996, Research in Motion introduces the first two-way messaging pager, and by 1997, the company was publicly traded on the Toronto Stock Exchange. One of the first products to carry the BlackBerry name was another pager with a full QWERTY keyboard, which later became synonymous with the brand. In fact, the name BlackBerry comes from the shape and feel of the keys on that keyboard. This pager's main strength was the device's integration with emails. This gave business users and executive sales reps the first easy-to-use, on-the-go access to email, and this was
like usable. It was so easy to type on. And I'm telling you, I had a what's up, Kitchener Waterloo represent. What's crazy about these, like, I gotta tell you guys, when we started switching to like iPhones and other devices in the companies that I worked at, it was impossible to pry these out of their hands. Like, there is so much brand loyalty and just the experience and how the device worked and how good it was. It just like ripping out a text message when your life is just like constantly bombarding like hundreds of people throughout the day with messages. There was no better way to do it than
It's a
this.
huge deal. And in here, BlackBerry would find its market. The next model would integrate telephone capabilities, something that hadn't ever really been done well before. At the time, in the 1990s, there was a race to dominate the newly developed handheld
Look at those
space.
phones.
Palm, Ericsson, and IBM were all in on the game. Even Apple tried with the Apple Newton and its stylus. The latter ended up being a disaster because the software wasn't up to scratch.
The Newton was a sick idea, though. I remember when I first saw that, it was just like that. You knew it was the future. Like, when you saw stuff like that, you're like, okay, this doesn't work. Like, this is obviously like it should work, and if it did work, it would be sick. But like, yeah, this is the direction that we need to take things in. Like devices that you touch and things happen to them without a keyboard.
BlackBerry looked at this market from a very different point of view. They were going to innovate. What none of the big players in the 1990s realized was that bandwidth was very limited for data transmissions. Mike, the founder of Research in Motion, did understand this limitation. Within the BlackBerry devices, he had created an instrument that distributed the bits of data communications in such a way that it wouldn't overload the networks. So while others were charging massive amounts of money for something that barely worked over a network, BlackBerry devices just worked. This, combined with a keyboard that could be effectively used with thumbs, made BlackBerry have the clear advantage.
I cannot stress this enough. Like, again, just that idea of like, yeah, it just fucking. That's why when like your BlackBerry stopped working, you're like, oh no, like something is very wrong, because this thing is they were tanks. It was such a different time for mobile messaging and the relationship that we had with our phones, because you didn't necessarily have like apps. Like, there were apps, but you weren't like buying things online or interacting with some, Internet of Things device at home, turning your lights up and down. Like, it didn't have that depth of interaction. It was more of a self-contained ecosystem of like, here's email and like internet access, and if you want to take some pictures too, that's cool.
Another part of BlackBerry's success was their guerrilla marketing. BlackBerry employees would often go to conferences and spotted business people who were using chunky laptops. The BlackBerry employees would give these people a BlackBerry to try for free for a month. As the business users replaced their laptops with BlackBerries, this created massive word-of-mouth marketing, and soon the devices became a necessity and took over the business world. The device was just so much more practical than other phones at the time. The hype of the BlackBerry soon carried through down to non-business users, and BlackBerry decided to target them too, integrating more features for the everyday user. The BlackBerry Pearl was their step into this new space.
I remember one of the cooler innovations that BlackBerry had before any other company did was this, and they just couldn't get people stoked on it. When you take a photograph on an iOS device, if you're familiar with the concept of live photos, so if I like take a picture, it actually takes like a very tiny video. So I can kind of slide, a little back if I didn't quite get that person's face. Oh, there, I can like go back a couple of milliseconds. Yes, their smile is perfect right there. BlackBerry was one of the first companies to introduce that, and that came out of them being like, oh, we need to have more like cool like social features on our devices.
It featured multimedia elements such as a camera and came with a new service called BlackBerry Messenger.
Oh, also BBM. Sorry, I can't believe we cannot talk about BlackBerry without talking about BBM. BBM is the OG iMessage. It was the best way to communicate. You could communicate on Wi-Fi, so you didn't have to use like cellular signal. It was super like tiny little text messages. So it was efficient. It just fucking worked. And also you had the ability to have sent and read receipts for the first time as well.
In the mid-2000s, service providers typically charged per text message, the most common form of messaging back then. But BlackBerry Messenger used internet data to transfer cheap and quick messages, much like iMessage and iPhones today. Back then, it was nothing short of revolutionary. It allowed people to escape their text message limited plans. This innovation...
And you had a pin. Like, you literally would have your own, like, whatever the pin is for the device. And so that's how you would communicate with someone. You'd be like, you wouldn't say, like, what's your email? It's like, yo, what's your pin? And a lot of people, you could just, like, QR code it if you wanted to, or you could just, like... A lot of people had the message. Yes, and that's another thing that I think they're going to get to is that the BlackBerry Messenger service was end-to-end legit encrypted. Let's just say how do I say this without getting into too much detail? I know people who are like in military, who specifically used to, and they don't anymore because they don't exist, but specifically use BlackBerry because they're just like, that's the only one that's worth using if you don't want your shit hacked. So,
made BlackBerry very popular, and soon enough, BlackBerry was everywhere. At its peak, the company had 20% share of global smartphone market and 50% of the United States market. It was a Goliath in the tech world. Its users ranged young and old, professional and casual. The company's position in the market was so strong. So, how did it go all so wrong?
This is exactly how it went bad. Like, the iPhone showed up.
It was the year 2007. George W. Bush was president, the first Transformers movie was released, and Windows Vista was still fresh.
Ugh.
Steve Jobs went on the stage at Macworld to talk about a new product Apple was working on. It was a phone, a mini computer, a web browser, and an email machine, all in the one device. Meanwhile, in Canada, founder of BlackBerry, Mike Lazaridis, looked at the announcement that Steve Jobs had just made and said, quote, "This is an impossibility. The networks wouldn't be able to carry this. It's illogical that anyone would even propose this." End quote.
And that right there, that statement is exactly why that company's dead, because people were not able to, like, there are legitimate, like, limitations in networks and how things work, but then there's also just fundamental misunderstandings and people who have really limited thinking. It's like, okay, I might not be able to do that, like, today, but in 3 or 6 or a year, you're going to be in a position where the networks are going to have improved bandwidth, more speed, do more. And, like, look where we are now, where we're not, like, our 4G networks are pretty maxed out in terms of the speed that they can get. But, with, like, 5G and other, wireless technologies, just always on, like in 10 years, we will all essentially have a gigabit internet connection. Minimum. Gigabit will be kind of the floor of the standard. Every home will have gigabit. Phones will have hopefully close to gigabit by then, and that's it. It's just all going to be about, like, how much content can I funnel into your gullet. The one thing that people forget too is that, like, corporations and the telecommunications companies have a huge vested interest in building networks that can deliver content, because then you can guzzle it, right? It's like, if we build it, they will come. So hence the iPhone.
Thing was, Mike was right. The iPhone dropped calls and Apple faced lawsuits for a product that simply just didn't.
So I have a friend who is working on something, and I'm going to try and obfuscate this as much. Let's just say he's working for a company that does voice recognition, and it was for an automobile and for an offline voice recognition system, right? So there's actually organizations that, it's like, we need bandwidth and we need high-speed internet connections, but on the back of that also, there is technologies that they're building to say, like, so, hey, what if this driverless car can't connect to the internet for some reason? Like, what if the internet in that area goes down? How much base, like, imagine it as a brain, right? Your car's brain is essentially extended by the fact that it can connect to the internet and, talk to the cloud and use cloud computing to augment its decisions and its responses and how to do what it needs to do. If that gets cut off, then it kind of can go back to its, like, almost reptile brain. It's like, right, I have basic function, I can I can safely get this car to where it needs to go for maintenance, or like get it off the road, or whatever it is. So it's interesting that there's a lot of work going into like technologies that complement that stuff.
Didn't work properly. But then, after the initial setbacks, the iPhone began to work, and Mike became very wrong. Within that 2-year period, the iPhone had taken the world by storm.
Understatement
Its
of
interactive but multi-touch
of the
capacitive
day.
touchscreen captured the imagination of users and developers. By the time BlackBerry realized what a serious threat that this was, they were already followers. To add to the problem, Android phones like HTC also started to hit the market, pushing the barriers and increasing competition. This was new for BlackBerry, as previously they didn't have many strong competitors. There was Sony Ericsson, Nokia, and Motorola too, but BlackBerry was set above as a premium mobile phone brand. Almost overnight, that all changed. The iPhone did many things better than BlackBerry. A bigger screen, better interaction by capacitive touch, better multimedia playback, and a better camera were just some. But it was the browser that really differentiated the two.
All of this is so true. Like kind of every part of the iPhone was better, with the only exclusion being the keyboard. I've always hated touchscreen keyboards. I will hate touchscreen keyboards until I leave this earth. And yeah, that's really, and that wasn't enough. Like it was enough for like a little while, but not for all. Like no one held out because like I really like this keyboard, dude.
BlackBerry had a much smaller screen to render images, limiting the way that the layout could be displayed. With nearly double the screen size, the iPhone shot its competitor out of the water, allowing more ways to interact with the page. Not only this, but most interactions with the device just simply felt more natural too. But BlackBerry wouldn't go down without a fight.
The torch. I remember the torch. And the storm.
Contrary to popular belief, at this time, BlackBerry was still doing well. They were expanding in Indonesia, India, and other parts of the world. They were a huge company and even had to build new factories to keep up with demand.
It's insane because they actually also had really good market share. Again, in like India was enormous, all over Asia. Like BlackBerry was just like super fucking popular. But yeah, the browsing, you can barely compare the two. It was like, and there was something that was kind of nice about just like, okay, I can click through this. And if I want to type something, awesome. But you want to look at like web page, it's like, oh, this is actually the web page. It's not like a shitty BlackBerry version of the web page that I'm seeing. Yeah, it was a complete like leap in technology.
The iPhone got its original network problem solved. BlackBerry reacted. The next phone would have a much larger screen, while still paying homage to the QWERTY.
This thing sucked so bad. So bad. I'm going to tell you why it sucks so bad, because all the BlackBerry boys at work, all the BlackBerry boys and the BlackBerry girls and the BlackBerry NBs at work would show up to my desk. They got their phones from me, and they'd come and they'd be like, hey, I have a new torch, set me up. And I'm like, yeah, okay, fine, no problem. I'd get my hands on it. I'm like, this fucking thing feels like a fucking piece of shit. Like, it feels flimsy. Like texting on a lip like that. And it just didn't feel good. And the keyboard was just a little bit different. So it was so, anyway. I would hand it to the person and be like, hey, I copied all your contacts. Like, everything's done. See you. Have a nice day. And I shit you not, no more than a day, they'd be back at my desk and be like, hey, I don't want this. Can you just switch my SIM out and put it back in my old phone? Like, this thing is fucking garbage. So this, again, was like they just tripped over their feet. They did this. They did the BlackBerry Storm. They tried going into Android. And it was just like, I think Steve Jobs is a dumb idiot who didn't really do that much, but what I will say is that he added one of the most important components of the recipe, which was like vision. There is something to be said about tech companies who have leaders that have like a real serious vision about what they are trying to achieve, the standards in which they uphold the company to, and compromises that they're not willing to make, right? And it's not just about having a blind vision, it's about kind of being a visionary, about seeing, like, that's what Steve Jobs is. Like, I know what people want. I'm going to build this iPhone. Everyone's like, oh, I've wanted this my whole life. This is so sick. So that's something that, like, they missed the mark on big time. And you can tell because they were flailing. They start building all these weird, shitty phones that, like, aren't nearly as good. Anyway, I'll let the video keep talking for itself.
Keyboard that made them famous, this time utilizing a slide-down tab. The issue at the core of BlackBerry was that it was trying to compete in a dynamic market by changing its physical features. All the while, its operating system remained relatively unchanged. BlackBerry soon realized this and reacted by changing their Java-based OS with a new OS built in a language called QNX. But unfortunately, developers simply didn't like QNX.
It was so bad. It was so... BlackBerry 10 was the worst fucking...
They opted to make apps for Android and
Apple. It was so bad, like really unfortunate to use.
Ultimately, it was a destructive feedback loop for BlackBerry. Less third-party apps meant fewer people wanting to buy BlackBerry devices, meaning developers had fewer people to sell their apps to, which in turn meant that developers would produce fewer apps for BlackBerry, and the destructive loop continues. In the space of a year, BlackBerry had dropped from the most popular mobile brand to third. In another attempt to save BlackBerry, they changed their operating system yet again, but now they jump ship to their competitors by using Android OS. But unfortunately, this move demonstrated that BlackBerry was no longer different from any other Android.
And it's crazy because they tried to make like an Android version of BBM. They added this thing called the BlackBerry Hub that was supposed to like consolidate all of your messages into like a super easy digestible way. And honestly, every time I looked at BlackBerry Hub, I would just have like a seizure. Like I would just look at it and be like, oh, you've taken comprehensible information and seem to have given it to me in the most incomprehensible format I have ever seen. It's like quite, you know what's funny is the playbook. Like I remember getting my hands on the playbook and like I was excited about it. I was like, oh, like this is pretty fucking cool. Like it was a really nice piece of technology. The build quality was good. The screen was like fucking amazing. Like it actually looked really nice. The problem is it ran on the shitty BlackBerry operating system. It had like no like flexibility to it whatsoever. And again, they just kept building like, even if they had a product that was like half decent, it was shit. This thing, I think this might be the Storm. Yeah, just like again, Android in a BlackBerry. So a friend of mine is a BlackBerry just diehard, absolute BlackBerry diehard, and he brings me a BlackBerry. He's like, hey, I have to switch out of my old classic. Like he had a very sick, nice, classic old little BlackBerry. He's like, got to give it up. Got to switch out to this other BlackBerry version. Can you do it? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Just drop it off. I'll take a look. I take everything out of the box. I'm like, wait, what the fuck? This is like Android. How the hell am I supposed to put this into an Android phone? It was very bizarre. We got it done, but it was a pain in the ass.
Phone and held no edge in this newly developing market. So naturally, they pivoted to becoming a software company. These days, the company mainly focuses on security and enterprise software. They still do sell phones, but they only account for 0.05% of the global market. Ugh. Effectively, nothing.
It's brutal.
Android and the iPhone undoubtedly killed BlackBerry, but it was BlackBerry themselves who allowed them to do this. They were at the top, and complacency crept in. The models of BlackBerry didn't really show any great leaps forward or exciting new technology to make you trade in your old one. They simply kept producing the same phone model over and over again.
Which, to be fair, Apple has also done, right? Like, I mean, at least the thing with Apple is at least they had a modicum of, like, innovations, improvements, and features that kind of made it feel like, oh, this is, like, a pretty big step up, even though, like, it looks basically the same. Like, it's a reskin of the old one. Like, oh, the screen is better. The camera's amazing. Oh, it has this feature that didn't have before. I mean, the last couple of years, obviously, I don't think we've gotten anything particularly smashing out of Apple or anything particularly exciting. But yeah, anyway, Apple does the same thing. I think all technology companies can fall victim to this pretty easily.
Cameras did improve a little, and they did have new improved features here and there, but not the big leaps that were seen with Apple and Android devices at the time. BlackBerry stopped competing, sat on its hands, and once competitors got ahead, they woke up and started.
That phone sucked too. I tried that one too. Oh.
Vision. They pushed the company into what they thought consumers wanted instead of actually listening to them. Jim Balsillie, former co-CEO of BlackBerry in 2010, was quoted as saying, "There may be 300,000 apps for the iPhone, but the only app you need is your browser." This perhaps epitomizes the hard-headed culture and lack of vision in the company, which would ultimately lead to its destruction. The company leadership failed in several aspects. Firstly, they failed to realize that non-business consumers would eventually drive the market. Secondly, they reacted poorly to the new app economy, which made the iPhone and Android devices so popular. And lastly, they didn't foresee that mobile devices would evolve from a simple communications device to full mobile entertainment devices. The executives persisted with a QWERTY keyboard in the face of touchscreen devices. Just another example of failing to see where the market was heading.
Oh, honestly, though, I think we could use one phone company that did QWERTY keyboards properly. I'm sorry, like, that would be sick. I would love a physical keyboard phone to this day. Honestly, I would use this BlackBerry if I could. Like, this is just like, I dug this out. It's brand new, out of the box. I've been keeping it in my closet for emergencies. Unfortunately, now because BlackBerry has actually shut down some of the fundamental services, I don't even think you can use these to call 911 with or without a SIM card. Not to mention the SIM cards in them, like, it's a traditional full-size SIM. My iPhone has two SIMs. It has one's an eSIM, which isn't even a real SIM, and then another is a micro. So I would have to have the adapter to plush that out, get it in here. I mean, yeah, we're definitely not going to break my SIM card on the Tech Talk today. But if I could use this phone, like, just for texting and typing, I absolutely would. It is the shit. That's my rant on physical keyboards.
By any means, but in the early stages of Android, when they saw the iPhone, they immediately realized that touch was the future and pivoted their designs to get rid of their keyboards. BlackBerry could have done this.
What I do give Jim and Mike credit for is the way they ran that company. There was enough gas left in the tank, if you will, to keep the company going. And by that I mean Mike Lazaridis still had a library of innovations, while Jim Balsillie in his financing, the company had over $5 billion of cash when it ran into trouble in 2013. It had no debt, it was conservatively financed. It allowed them to buy time to get through their problems.
The story of BlackBerry once again highlights the speed at which the technology market can move. BlackBerry got on top by providing a great product, but somewhere along the line, they stopped innovating. When the iPhone came out, they were complacent and didn't realize the future until it was too late. Even as far as 2010, they didn't believe in the concept of apps. Ultimately, BlackBerry was a company which rose to the top, but didn't know how to stay there. They weren't hungry to consistently make a better product.
Exactly.
Apple and Google Android's fierce competition over the years continues to push the boundaries of mobile phone technology. BlackBerry just never felt this pressure until it was too late. And in the tech world, when you start playing catch-up, you've already lost. BlackBerry still makes phones today, but they could have been the Apple of today if they reacted faster to the iPhone. It definitely wouldn't have been easy, but it was definitely possible. As a result, the company couldn't keep its share of the market. And in total, that is the rise and fall of BlackBerry. So thanks for watching this video. So did you ever own a BlackBerry? And if you did,
hell yeah,
would you like to still see BlackBerry dominate the smartphone market?
Not dominate, but like, as again, and like, it's as if you're a Canadian, you feel this one particularly difficult. Like, we do not have a lot of huge players in these kinds of spaces, and back then, like, BlackBerry was like a huge W for Canada. Like, Kitchener-Waterloo area benefited very much from the campuses that they operated from. I think a lot of funding and talent and just excitement went into the educational system around there. Being so adjacent to a company like RIM, a lot of people coming to the school just like, yeah, I'm going to work for BlackBerry. I'm going to work for BlackBerry. And so it sucks to see like a big company like that is, you know, ostensibly good for Canadians to go the wayside. But, you know, that's kind of the nature of not just like tech these days, but particularly disruptive, innovative spaces when you don't continue to stay on top of that curve. And again, it's like it's kind of like almost like a ball they started rolling, and then they're just like, can we slow this down? Like, no, dude, like you started like this exciting journey into, you know, what our mobile devices can do for us. Like, you better keep up, or we're definitely going to leave you behind. And speaking of not being left behind, let's there's a really interesting story about the building of the original iPhone that I want to at least kick off. I don't know if I want to watch the whole thing, but we'll see. We'll see how much of it is actually is interesting. But I definitely am excited to talk about this AI drawing stuff. I really want to figure out how to run something like this. Like, what is the type of box that you would need to execute this type of a thing, or how much time would it require to compute like a particular instruction? So I think that would actually be a really fun thing to look into. Let's watch some stuff. Let's iPhone stuff. Oh, one thing, just sorry, before I switch gears, go completely mad here. Where is it? Damn, I thought I had the where is it? Netflix stock. I mean, like, you know, there it is. You just see it. You're just like, oh, boom, boom, boom. Looks like a ball dropping. And when you look at companies, like, again, I'm not saying it's by any means this, but that's a pretty hard ball drop. You know, to be going from almost 700 a stock to, oof. It's a fall from grace, my guys. Anyway. iPhone.
Every once in a while,
Oh,
a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything. Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone.
actually, hold on. You know, before we start this, because Coco got me thinking about something. Where was it? Here we go. Can you still use BlackBerry Playphone?
Hey guys, I hope you're all well and safe. It's Jack from Tech Solutions here, and today in this video we are going to
Sorry, but for the Oibrums, I just bruv. Sorry, I'm very Oibrum-phobic.
Yes, that's right. 9 years ago. How crazy is that? In this video, we're going to be looking at the.
Let's skip
It's
ahead.
quite a stylish design, even if the bezels are quite chunky.
I mean, if you just have a look at these bezels, the side
Wait, I forgot. The bezels are fucking huge. That's pretty big. That's
if you're going to carry around this device today, people will think, what is that?
It still looks pretty slick and is fairly small, which means that it can fit into your hand nice and easily. Using the device 9 years after the release date, I was surprised just how well the software functioned. The screen was surprisingly good, especially for the time, but
did a very
even
good job
now,
of recording it,
okay.
though.
I mean, the screen is only 7 inches, which seems pretty small compared to today's standards, but don't be fooled, even in 2020, the screen doesn't look too bad. Websites today, such as YouTube, and even though the internet works, just browsing the internet will highlight the age of the tablet. But then again, what do you expect from a device that came out in 2011? We did try
That's
to
fair.
access YouTube, and the website kind of works, but then you can't really do anything with it, and that's the same for a lot of other things. One thing that did work was BBC News and Google, but you can still see how old the tablet is as soon as you start browsing the internet.
That's just a fascinating thing to think of, is that how much like the code of the internet changes over time, and the way website data is either compiled, sent, or whatever has changed so much that it just, like, some devices, like, no, I have no idea what you're saying to me. Also, that happens a lot when they don't have, like, a standard browser like Chrome or something that a normal human being would use. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Let's jump back in here.
Why in the world would Apple Computer want to jump into the handset market with so much competition?
We use all the handsets out there. It's really frustrating. It's a category that needs to be reinvented.
With over 2 billion units sold, the iPhone is the most influential product of all time. It created the modern smartphone and turned the device into an instant gateway to the world. Everything you desire in the palm of your hand. It changed everything. But where did it come from? If it wasn't a sudden idea from Steve Jobs, who actually came up with the idea? Who were the people that built it, and what are their stories? With the most recent release of the iPhone, it's easy for many people to forget just how revolutionary it once was. Today, we're going to see how it all began, and how the pressure of doing the impossible cost some people their marriage and their health. This video will include my exclusive interview with Ken Koshenda, one of the pioneers of the original
cool.
iPhone. He worked directly with Steve Jobs on the project. This is the secret history of the iPhone.
We're for a treat.
You are watching Cold Fusion TV.
To begin our story, we have to go back to the early 2000s. At this time, human-computer interaction was a mess before smart devices.
Sorry, one thing that I will say that tripped me up immediately about this phone was when I picked it up, because the next iteration of the BlackBerry that they got really excited about was like, oh, the screen, you can touch it and it does stuff. This is not a touch screen. Like, the only way that you can interact with this device is through the keyboard. So when I picked it up, I went to, like, push buttons, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's old as fuck. It doesn't work, yo.
Manipulating digital objects was a chore. In the early 2000s, zooming in on an image usually meant clicking on a menu, selecting the zoom option, and then selecting the amount you wanted to zoom in by. How we zoom in on an image today couldn't be more different. We can simply pinch a screen and manipulate it with our fingers. Back then, such interactions weren't obvious and only became possible with touchscreens. Touchscreens existed back then, but they were predominantly resistive touch. That's the kind of screen where you have to use a lot of force to touch. Think ATM screens or information screens at train stations and airports. On smaller screens, resistive touch is inexact and frustrating. In the 90s, Apple tried to use resistive touch in a device called the Newton, but it failed. Before even dreaming of a device like the iPhone, this was the first problem that had to be solved. By 2007, the world was looking for a new way to approach.
Had different touchscreen technology been available, the landscape of, like, just touchscreen devices in general would have been different. Back in the 90s, Palm Pilot was something that, if you were in business, like, some people really liked them. And they were pretty great. Like, you could get a fair bit of use out of them. I had several versions of the Palm Pilot, and, you could write notes in it, and it was decent. But yeah, like, had better touchscreens been available, those companies would have been the companies that just absolutely dominated the space. And this is one of the things that gave Apple a real fucking leg up.
The mobile phone. They just needed a company to be in the right place at the right time with the right product. You may be surprised to find out that the first seeds of the iPhone came not from Apple, but from a small company in Delaware called Finger.
They might have. They might have also bought some, like, patents or something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it may more than likely was an acquisition. Like, that's a lot of what they do, right? Is they're like, we want to build something, and then they kind of sniff around and say, like, who is the furthest ahead of this technology? Those guys are. Hire them immediately.
It works. Founded in 1998.
There's actually a really great story. I think this is, let me see if I can find it really quickly. YouTube.com. Interview with, Steve Jobs. There is a really interesting video. I wonder if I can find it. Where this guy talks about like interview, and it's a bizarre experience. Like it kind of sounds like they are they're like there's like psychological warfare involved. Anyway, I'll pull out a tab. I'll try and find it. We'll keep watching this. It's a very interesting insight into Steve Jobs' thinking and like the people at Apple and how they recruit talent.
Fingerworks had figured out how to use a different type of technology effectively. It was called capacitive multi-touch. It was fast, responsive, precise, and most importantly, smart enough to recognize multiple fingers and what they were trying to do.
He was a scare.
I reached out to Wayne for an interview, but unfortunately, after his company was bought by Apple in 2005, he was whisked away and sworn to secrecy. He couldn't give me any interviews about his work. In the early 2000s, Fingerworks released a trackpad called the iGesture. It helped people with wrist injuries easily use a computer without aggravating their injury. Wayne Westerman, the founder of Fingerworks, had suffered from a wrist condition himself. Sometimes he couldn't type more than a page without his wrist
I think
suffering.
you just predicted exactly where this video is going, dude.
Motivated him to innovate new solutions for his university research paper.
Right.
And this resulted in the Fingerworks technology.
Oh, this is sick.
Wayne even wrote a simple AI program to help the system understand the differences between accidental and intentional touches. When gestures were performed, the pad would interpret them and turn the movements into computer shortcuts, like copy, paste, and scroll. Wayne Westerman and Fingerworks would play a critical role in the development of the iPhone. Here's Ken Koscienda to talk about it a bit more.
My name is Ken Koscienda, and for many years I worked at Apple, from 2001 until 2017. In 2005, I was asked to join the iPhone project. I had very good experience working with Wayne. But back at the beginning, he had a company called Fingerworks, which is an independent company which Apple bought, part for the technology and part to get him because he was so talented.
Early on, Steve Jobs hated the idea of Apple making a phone. He was concerned about a lack of focus in the company, the precise issue that he'd solved on his return to Apple in 1997. Steve Jobs believed that a phone would only serve a niche geek market. Cell phones at the time were not the easiest to use, so you can understand why it wouldn't have seemed right for a trendy company like Apple to get into this market. As we all know, this sentiment would later change.
One thing that I think is really important from like a historical context, not just stuff like Apple, but like also their sort of, because there is a trajectory that they were on that this is a part of, right? This is the curve where things really started to take off, and that was the iPod. The iPod completely revolutionized Apple's brand. It like literally revitalized the company from a profit perspective. They started making mad money again, and from there they were able to make some really good strategic decisions like, hey, we're going to go back to Intel processors and build these like kick-ass little plastic Macs that everyone's going to actually love again. We're going to look at doing phones instead and taking like our iPhone and making a, device, or sorry, our iPod, and merging that with communications technology. Anyway.
Meanwhile, within Apple, a group of engineers and software designers would meet weekly in what used to be a user testing room. They were all from different departments, but united by curiosity and imagination. They realized that the web and digital revolution was bringing richer and ever more complex media to computers. They realized that clicking and typing may not be the best way to navigate this new future. What if there was a more fluid way to interact with content? With this idea, they would start an informal human-computer interaction group within Apple. Their goal was to improve our interactions with technology. One day...
Sorry, just not to cut, but one thing that I think is super interesting is that we still have fucking keyboards and mice. You know what I mean? Like that's as much as like we love having touchscreens and touch phones and stuff. Like for desktops and laptops, just there is nothing that beats for getting words onto a screen and moving and interacting with things, especially like video games and stuff. They're just nothing beats the old school.
In 2002, an Apple employee by the name of Tina Huang brought a Fingerworks device to work due to a wrist injury. It was a black, rectangular pad that allowed the seamless execution of complicated computer tasks by just the use of her fingers. The Fingerworks touchpad was seen by some curious Apple human interaction employees in their user testing room. Because they were already thinking of new ways to interact with technology, to them, multi-touch interaction was an interesting prospect. Inspired, they whipped up a demo to show Apple's marketing department. Using the multi-touch gesture pad and a projector, they displayed an interactive image of macOS. The idea was that you could use finger-based gestures on the pad to manipulate elements of the desktop software. The demo was met with minimal enthusiasm from the marketing team. They just didn't see a need for it, and how could they? There was no product that would really need it. Unfazed, the interaction group continued to have weekly meetings to discuss the possibilities. Johnny Ive, who was one of the weekly members of the informal group, had also shown Steve Jobs the concept. Initially, Jobs rejected it. He remarked that it would only be good for, quote, reading something on a toilet, end quote.
Okay, to be fair, he definitely was not wrong there. There's a lot of people who use this technology specifically, if not almost exclusively.
Johnny Ive, being of a sensitive nature, took the comment personally and was hurt by it. After some further thought, however, Jobs warmed up to the idea and the project would be greenlit, but it became riddled with problems and was ultimately shut down. In July of 2004, Steve Jobs had a surgery to remove a tumor in his pancreas. The realization that he might have a limited time on this planet helped accelerate the timetable of what needed to be done at Apple.
About a year ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. I had a scan at 7:30 in the morning, and it clearly showed a tumor on my pancreas. I didn't even know what a pancreas was. The doctors told me this was almost certainly a type of cancer that is incurable, and that I should expect to live no longer than 3 to 6 months. I've looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I am about to do today? And whenever the answer has been no for too many days in a row, I know I need to change something. Your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking and don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you'll know when you find it.
Around this time, Tony Fadell, who led the successful iPod division, suggested to Jobs that it would be a good idea to put Wi-Fi in an iPod. While Jobs thought about it, Tony and his small team would get to work on a new iPod, a PDA hybrid prototype. The result was a disaster. Imagine an iPod with modified software allowing users to navigate the web with a click wheel. Jobs hated it. He understood that it worked, but thought it was a rubbish experience. Jobs told Tony to try another way.
That's brutal.
In 2005, Bas Ording, a programmer and UI designer, received a call from Steve Jobs asking him to make a demo of a touch interface of a scrolling list. Steve now wanted to do a touchscreen phone. Demos were the way that Apple as a company worked through creative concepts and ideas to see what could be the next product.
And then we would make demos and something you could try out right away. And the thing is, these first demos and prototypes are never any good. You think that there is going to be some genius aha moment, but it never works like that. Well, hopefully there's some little kernel in there. There's some aspect of it that's stronger than other aspects of it. And so you go and look for those strong parts. Natural world uses natural selection generation after generation, improving and improving. In technology, we have creative selection, taking our ideas and building up a product from these humble beginnings. It's a long, iterative, evolutionary process.
While Ording was making the contactless demo, he noticed that when scrolling, the text image would suddenly stop when he hit the bottom of the screen. Because of this sudden stopping of all the motion, he thought that his code had crashed. After some time, Ording noticed that he had in fact reached the end of the list. This gave him an idea. Why not have the image bounce so that there's some visual feedback that lets you feel like you've reached the end of the list, and not like it suddenly crashed? This was the genesis of the rubber banding effect on the iPhone. When Steve saw Ording's rubber banding effect for the first time, he realized that a phone could indeed have a touch interface. While work on the scrolling list demo was happening, other touchscreen projects were secretly going on at Apple as well. As cool as these demos were, they were no more than a bunch of disjointed concepts. Some pinching and zooming here, a few widgets there, some notes and a calculator, but nothing with a unified structure. Steve wasn't impressed with the disjointed array of demos. Didn't seem like there was a product to sell. In early 2005, Jobs gave the team 2 weeks to create something great, and it had to be great, or else. A small team at Apple spent 2 sleepless weeks trying to get the company's first touchscreen phone right. They focused on the vision of a phone and its function. How do you make a phone call on a touchscreen? How do you get from a calendar to web browsing? What's the logical flow of getting from one application to another? Amazingly, by the end of the 2-week period, they had something to show Jobs. The first time Steve Jobs saw the prototype, he didn't jump for joy or exclaim anything. He was silent. Sitting back, he said, "Show it to me again." He was, in fact, blown away. The project would be top secret within Apple from that point forward. Around the same time, Apple would purchase Fingerworks, bringing Fingerworks' whole team on board to try and help figure out this new jackpot. So now, Apple had 2 choices on how to transform this technology into a product. 1. Enlarge the already successful iPod into a phone, or 2. Shrink macOS down into a phone using Fingerworks touch technology. Nobody knew which would work best, so Steve let both ideas run. The iPod enlarging team was led by Tony Fadell, and the multi-touch macOS team was led by Scott Forstall. Forstall's team was seen as the underdogs. After all, Tony Fadell had helped push millions of iPod sales and was also working on 2 smash hits, the iPod Nano and the iPod Video.
They were pretty sick.
The battle had begun. Neither team was allowed to know what each other was doing. In fact, the hardware guys weren't allowed to see any software, and the software guys weren't allowed to see any hardware. Hardly anyone working on the phone at Apple knew what the device was going to look like until the keynote, and they weren't given a solid date for that either. During the stress, some members would quit, and others would be fired. At one point, Phil Schiller, head of marketing, had had enough and thought that both projects should be scrapped. An Apple phone with a BlackBerry-style keyboard seemed like the most sensible option.
Sorry. No. Sorry.
While these projects were going, top Apple executives convinced Jobs that something needed to be done about encroaching MP3-capable mobile phone sales, and quickly. Jobs agreed to partner with Motorola, the coolest phone company at the time, with their thin Razr phone. They would make an iTunes phone. The idea was people would try out iTunes on the phone and then hopefully go off and buy an iPod. Apple would have no involvement in the hardware, only focusing on iTunes integration. The result was the Motorola Rocker. Already outdated on release, the thing just sucked.
Go there and I just resume my music right back to where it was. Well, I was supposed to resume my music right back to where it was. I hit the wrong button. But you can resume your music right back to where it was if you hit the right button.
The Rocker was so bad that it was soon being returned at a rate of 6 times higher than the industry average.
Wow.
Consumers were expecting something big from Apple, and this wasn't it. After the Motorola failure, Jobs returned his attention back to the iPod phone, which was Tony Fadell's team, as it was the safer option. he still did leave the Touch macOS team led by Scott Forstall to continue. Tony's team tried a plethora of designs, one of which was similar to an iPod video, but with a phone mode. If you wanted music, it would behave like a regular iPod with touch controls for play, pause, etc. around a scroll wheel. When you needed to dial a number, you would switch it into phone mode and the device would behave like a rotary phone. It wasn't perfect, but Jobs still insisted that the idea could work. Nobody within Apple really knew what this new device was. The iPod team saw it as another portable accessory like the iPod, so software wasn't important.
It's pretty fucked that they got it together, considering, like, he did it in a very, like, skunkworks operation. Like, the left hand had no idea what the right hand was doing.
The Touch macOS team, on the other hand, saw it as a fully fledged, multi-touch computer that fit in your hand. Tony Fadell and his team were certain that this new phone should run a beefed-up version of iPod software, while Scott Forstall and his team thought a shrunken-down version of macOS would be better. They theorized that mobile chip technology had become powerful enough to run a version of macOS. It was juddery at first, but soon they managed to get scrolling to work smoothly on a compact version of macOS. And from this point, it was decided that this would be the way to go. The shrunken-down version of macOS would become known as iOS, and soon, Tony Fadell's iPod phone idea would be abandoned, and all efforts would be focused on iOS. As the software began to take place, details had to be ironed out. How do you unlock this thing without doing it by accident in your pocket? There's actually an interesting story to how this was solved.
Oh, I need to hear this.
One day, Freddie Anzers, a user interface designer within Apple, found the solution in the most unlikely of places.
Freddie Anzers has the answers, baby!
One day, Freddie was on a US domestic flight and felt the need to relieve himself. He got up from his seat and went to the toilet. As Freddie locked the cubicle door, he happened to observe the locking mechanism. It was so simple. You just slide it to unlock. And that's it. This concept lit a light bulb, and the result was the famous original slide to unlock feature. To test out this concept, an iPhone engineer later gave a prototype to his 3-year-old daughter. Without hesitation, she took her finger, slid and unlocked the phone. If a 3-year-old could figure it out, anyone could. Meanwhile, Johnny Ive was beginning to imagine what the hardware of this phone could look like. Although later designs would stray, the first sketch from Johnny Ive was close to the final product. He was imagining an infinity pool. Quote, this pond where the display would magically appear, the rest of the device had to get out of the way. End quote. Interestingly, Johnny Ive didn't want a headphone jack in the original iPhone.
Thank God.
As the project dragged on, tempers rose within the company due to secrecy, competition, and the time pressure of the project. And it was no wonder. Everything the teams were making was new. Touchscreen technology was in its infancy. The Apple engineers had to figure out how to make a transparent version of multi-touch mass-producible. Untested custom chips...
Because again, it's not just about building it so it works, right? It's like, oh yeah, we built the thing that you want us to do, but it costs $1 million a cubic centimeter, and producing it is virtually impossible because, you know, we can only make 5 of them a year because it's so complex, right? So it needs to be something that you can churn out a lot of.
Developed. Cell reception had to be worked out. Material designs needed to be perfected.
I don't know if anyone remembers, though, there was that one of the versions of the iPhone where they're like, oh, you're holding it wrong. Where, because of antenna placement, if you put your hand on one side of it, you would lose like 3/4 of reception. It's quite funny.
Basically, these teams, which had never made a phone before, were now trying to make the most ambitious device ever imagined. Imagine how it must have been for the developers too. If any app they were working on crashed, it could have been because of virtually a million things, from their coding to any one of the numerous experimental hardware components. By February of 2006, the team at Apple still didn't have a CPU, basically the brain of the device, and they were supposed to ship in a year. They decided to contract Samsung, who they'd partnered with previously for chips within the iPod. They asked Samsung if they had any powerful CPUs within certain specifications, and they did, but the only thing Samsung had was from a cable box. Without telling Samsung about the iPhone, Apple said they would need modifications to this chip in just 6 months. This is much less than half the usual development time for a new chip. And this would later cause problems.
1 second, I'm just looking for something.
By early 2006, the iOS software was making great progress, but the keyboard still sucked. It was just too small to type on, and it failed in all of the demos. Without a good keyboard, the whole phone wouldn't have worked. Realizing that the entire project was in jeopardy, Scott Forstall paused all development of applications on iOS and made everyone focus on the keyboard issue. Everyone on the team built keyboards for 3 straight weeks. When it came time to test the results of their work, they all still were no good, and there was only one engineer left to demonstrate his keyboard. It was Ken Koshienda. Nervously, he set it up for Scott to type on. Surprisingly, it worked, and it was accurate. The breakthrough was made by using primitive AI to figure out what was actually being typed, essentially predictive text. For example, if you were to type the letter T, there was a high chance you're going to type the letter H next. So the keyboard would make the contact region for H larger without changing the appearance of the button to the naked eye. Ken also had the foresight to use a dictionary to power suggestions and autocorrect.
This is a huge step forward in typing.
It was clear to me after the first couple of demos that since the screen was so small and since there was no tactile feedback on the touch screen, that there was going to need to be some new element. Now, my first ideas were different shaped keys, different ways of highlighting the keys so that you would just move your fingers, but that was a failed idea. That didn't work. And so it was the dictionary and software assistance, the notion that some code running in the background, looking at your touches on the screen and trying to figure out, well, what did you mean? And so combining that notion with the notion of a dictionary and a lot of work, a lot of experimentation helped produce that first result of autocorrection.
And to be honest with you, I think you're going to see just more and more. Like this is where I think AI excites me. It also scares me, but excites me more, is that it will be much more ubiquitous in helping us do the things that we want to do, or assisting us in solving problems that we never thought were solvable. Anyway, I'll let him continue to elaborate.
For the first time.
Without Ken's ideas in that high-pressure moment, it's possible that the iPhone wouldn't have made it off the ground.
Wow.
As it was all coming down to the wire for Apple, disaster struck. Just 3 months before the launch, the custom CPU chips from Samsung still had bugs that caused the phones to crash. With such little time left on the clock, it was looking like a catastrophe was in the making. As stress built, engineers started working 7 days a week, and some slept in their offices. Tempers flared, and employees shouted at each other. One employee slammed a door so hard out of frustration that the door handle broke, and she got trapped in her office and had to be broken out with a baseball bat. It seemed like the iPhone, which held so much promise, would be Apple's greatest disaster. Other aspects of the iPhone were still being slapped on very late in the product development cycle. One of its killer apps, Google Maps, was only added as an afterthought. On the hardware side, the original iPhone screen was supposed to be plastic like the iPods, but the decision to use glass was made 1 month after the launch.
Wow.
When the day of the keynote came on January 9th, 2007, none of the teams at Apple knew exactly what the final iPhone product would look like, even though they had worked on the project for years. When Steve Jobs took to the stage, some things were still incomplete. The iPhone's buggy CPU issue hadn't been properly solved yet, only patched up for the demo. This meant that the phone could crash at any time during the presentation. The Apple team held their breath, sweating, as they sat and watched Steve Jobs excitedly proclaim, and were calling it iPhone. There was mostly a positive reaction from the crowd, but also some uncertain laughter, as some thought that Jobs was joking about the name. Yet, the demo was going well. The crowd was loving the smooth scrolling and technological magic they were witnessing.
There we go, right there. And to unlock the phone, I just take my finger and slide it across. All right, you want to see that again? Go to sleep. We wanted something that you couldn't do by accident in your pocket, and just slide it across. Boom. Well, how do I scroll through my list of artists? How do I do this? I just take my finger and I scroll. That's it.
This seems so like pedantic and rudimentary and basic by today's standards, and to be fair, this wasn't like that fucking long ago. Like in terms of technology, it was ages ago, and the way things move these days as fast as they are, yes, it feels like a while ago, but it was not a while ago. It was not long ago that something as simple as like touch screen smooth scrolling was a breakthrough. And this is what innovation is. This goes to show you how much innovation and problem solving and legit technology and solutions went into making all of these components work within a ton of different constraints.
Isn't that cool? A little rubber banding up, run off the edge.
He loves
I
that.
call it the pinch. I can bring them closer together or move them further apart to make it bigger or smaller. And so I can just move them further apart and stretch the image.
That
Cool. And move it around. That cool?
As Tony Fadell, leader of the iPod phone team, looked on, Steve Jobs did something pretty cruel. When showcasing to the crowd how to delete contact, he gleefully slid Fadell's name off the iPhone contacts list.
Tony's changed his number. I got to update this anyway, so I'm going to get rid of that, and I could just remove Tony. Boom. There we go. It's that simple to edit these things.
He was basically saying to Tony, "You're fired." Scott Forstall states that during rehearsals of the presentation, Steve would always delete a random contact, never Tony's. To the crowd, it was just a demonstration of how this phone made everything fun and cool to use. To those working at Apple, it was a message. Tony was in trouble.
What a
In all of this,
dick fucking... He's an asshole, man. Steve Jobs is a fucking prick, and we'll get to that in a minute too.
Even invited to the event. But without his multi-touch innovation, there would be no iPhone. Instead, on stage, Steve Jobs stated that Apple had invented multi-touch. These events were a summary of how the project had been for most. Brutal. The project was so hard on the secret teams that it ruined marriages and cost some workers their health. Some employees worked every day, giving up their nights and weekends for years at a time. iPhone engineer Andy Grignon speaks, quote, "The iPhone is the reason I'm divorced. It was probably professionally the worst time in my life. You created a pressure cooker with a bunch of really smart people with an impossible deadline, an impossible mission, and then you hear that the future of the entire company is resting on it. There wasn't really any time to kick your feet back on the desk and say, this is going to be really awesome one day. Every time you turned around, there was some just imminent demise of the program just lurking around the corner. It was especially hard on the married guys. There were a lot of divorces. Oblivious to the sacrifice, the world was electric with the buzz of the iPhone.
Oh, that new phone? That new phone that's coming out?
We're going to do that right now. You see Andy's on top of everything. Here we go. Many people were anticipating the Macworld trade show this week.
iPod phone.
So far, they've not been disappointed.
That's great.
Show, Apple CEO
Oh my
Steve Jobs
goodness.
unveiling what many are calling a revolutionary new product, the iPhone.
You scroll lists by flicking like this, and it's like a roulette wheel. It goes stop like that. It's just so cool.
It's very clear to us that the world's going mobile. And we really believe that a device like this, which is, an order of magnitude more powerful than any mobile device or any cell phone that's ever been created, and yet vastly easier to use, is the future.
When it was all said and done, keen fans lined up to get one.
You paid $500 to secure a spot in this line. No, just come and sit here. What are you looking forward to using your iPhone for?
Just the fact that I can put all my music and everything on there, and it has a touch screen. And I don't know, I've seen the commercials, it looks really cool.
For me, in 2007,
That's it, baby.
after seeing Jobs' demo of
That's all there is to it.
gestures,
It looks
made
really
sense
cool.
to me that this was the perfect interface for a small screen device. The iPhone had way more than 1,000 times more computing power than NASA did in 1969 when they put man on the moon. Yet it was super easy to use, with a full web browsing experience to boot. Even children could pick up an iPhone and know what to do. Capacitive multi-touch and gestures had broken down the walls of human-computer interaction. The future had arrived. Finally, a computer in your pocket. As Apple software engineer Henry Lamerix would put it, quote, "We took a Mac and we squished it into a little box," end quote.
That's very...
Other small touches, like a proximity sensor that turned the screen off during a phone call so that it didn't touch your face by accident, and an accelerometer that could sense if you're holding the phone in portrait and landscape, made the whole package feel like magic. Today, it's just so easy to forget just how much of a leap the original iPhone was. What followed the iPhone was a complete shift in how we thought about technology. Now, information and news was instant. We became totally connected all the time. Though in the next decade, this overconnectedness would cause some issues. Once the initial fanfare was over,
mildly,
the sales
for sure.
of the iPhone would be slow. It would take the introduction of the App Store in 2008 to really kick things off again for Apple. If it wasn't for the App Store, the iPhone could have just been one of those devices that looked cool and was cool to use, but never caught on. For an entire year after the iPhone's launch, it could run a grand total of 16 apps. There was only one home screen's worth of apps, and that was it. And this isn't to mention how limited the iPhone was compared to some other devices out there. It had no multimedia messaging, no video camera, no cut and paste, no 3G, and the list goes on, but that wasn't important. Nokia, BlackBerry, and the rest of the established phone companies had been providing these features for many years. But the difference was, for the first time, the device was now a changeable blank canvas with no buttons.
Oh, it's that Will Smith scene from Men in Black. It's like, I make this look good.
Once the device could run apps on it, the iPhone's software creators could make it whatever they wanted it to be. Their creativity was only limited by their imagination and the hardware capability. Today, billions of apps have been sold, and the mobile app space has become a new industry. Companies like Nokia, BlackBerry, and Palm thought they knew the game, but they couldn't visualize the future. They thought things would never change, and before they realized, it was too late to prosper in this brave new world. Google was working on their own BlackBerry-style phone with a hardware keyboard, but when they saw the iPhone presentation, they abandoned that idea and went for full touchscreen. The result was the very first Android phone. But that's a story for another day.
Ooh, I hope he does a story about Android.
As the years passed, people became less and less excited with each new release of the iPhone. Maybe we've reached a point where the devices are just so good, there's only incremental improvements we can make. I asked Ken what he thought of Apple's direction, and he stated that if he was perfectly happy with Apple, he wouldn't have left in 2017, but he hopes that they continue to innovate. As we all know, Apple isn't the only game in town anymore. Competition is much stronger than ever before. Well, maybe the next big thing from Apple is around the corner, but at this stage, only time will tell. The story of the original iPhone is one of great sacrifice, risk, and reward. A story that shaped technology and the world as we know it. It gave the average person an interface to almost infinite information and knowledge, all in the palm of their hand. But sadly, almost nobody knows who invented these technologies and what the cost was to innovate such a device. To finish off, we'll have some words from Ken.
I hope that you all use technology and enjoy it. Some of the products that maybe that I made are useful and meaningful to you and bring you some joy in your life. If they do, then I've done my job.
In all of this, something has to be said for Steve Jobs. He may not have invented the technologies, and Ken told me he wasn't the nicest person to work for.
No, he was not.
Steve did care about making great products,
That's
and he would
kind
push
of-
people
it was kind of part of the
squeeze very best
problem.
out of them to make these products happen. And in that vein, without Steve, there also would be no iPhone.
It's true, very true.
If you've watched this video to the end, thank you, I appreciate it. I hope you can now look down at your iPhone or the other smartphones that followed and appreciate how they came to be. If you want to see more video documentaries from my book, New Thinking, there's a playlist below. If you are new here, you can subscribe so you don't miss out on more videos like this in the future.
So there's a great interview. What an interview with Steve Jobs feels like.
Scary guy, trust me. And we went out there.
And then after that, we are going to get to this awesome fucking video on Dale 2. I highly recommend sticking around, check this out, guys. But I think this is going to be an interesting palate cleanser to all that. What it's like to have to go through sort of the Apple hiring process and some of the like psychological warfare that people had to deal with far post iPhone.
And he only wanted to meet Ishwar and myself because Ishwar is a technologist who's much more important in his world than me. And Ishwar was a fanboy. Ishwar, you know, there's Hector fanboy. Ishwar is a SJ fanboy. Like everything, he knew everything about. I wasn't really like I was impressed. It was amazing. I couldn't believe I was there. And we go into the boardroom after about 5 hours of being grilled and prepared by other executives because they'd already done a ton of research on us. They wanted to buy our company, but you had to pass the Steve test. And there was a lot of things.
What do you mean the Steve?
There was a lot. Well, if Steve said no, you were done.
Yeah.
He never took a meeting by himself, so there was going to be a bunch of people in the room on the executive team. And he had a lot of quirks and things that he was going to do, and they prepared me ahead of time, which was kind of cool of them because they didn't for other people.
Yeah.
For example.
Well, that shows that they wanted the company
wanted
and they needed it to work, so they try to prep you.
They wanted it to work,
Yeah.
right? But Steve was tough, so this is a good one if you want. You should try this, Hector, as well. So Steve would do this as well. He'd say, so Hector, so you're really close with your dad, huh? 60 seconds. Nothing. Gotta hold the gaze. Don't say anything. People get so uncomfortable. Granted, it's Steve Jobs, but
Yeah.
also in life, that's what happens. People just get uncomfortable. So it was his litmus test to determine if you were a bozo or not.
Okay.
You're either a hero or a bozo.
Okay.
Bozos were going to fill up that uncomfortable silence with some bullshit, and he was going to know you weren't the guy, that you'd never be able to negotiate for him, you'd never be able to pull through in the clutch for him. So he gave me about 60 seconds, which felt like 6 hours. I was like, oh my God, I'm just holding the gaze. And finally I was like, can I help you? Everything okay?
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, yeah. And then he'd ask you a bunch of questions, right, about your family, your dad. And he would store it away. Maybe he'd use it right away, maybe he'd use it in a year, but he'd come back
Wow.
in a meeting, and maybe it was a poor meeting in his mind, and he'd bring you over. He'd be like, Hector, do you think you said your dad worked like 3 jobs and moved you from Juarez, Mexico, and just to give you this life? You think he'd be appreciated with the bullshit performance you made here today?
Jesus
Christ.
yeah.
Wow.
I just choked up.
Wow.
Just saying that, like, oh man, I gotta do more podcasts.
Yeah, he knows what made you tick. Whatever it was, he'd store it away.
Yeah.
He'd keep it, and he'd whip it out. And you wanted to please him. Everybody wanted to please Steve. And if you told him,
it's like a cult,
I can do
right?
this, man. I can do it in 6 months. He's like, great. You've got 4 weeks. And you'd say, there's no software. I can't make software. I can't even do this in 4 weeks. You have 4 weeks, and you would. And they did. They always did. And everybody at Apple was amazing. And everybody thought their shit didn't stink. And they were arrogant. And it was a wonderful, exciting place to be in. Especially then, the iPad just came out and everything else, and you felt you could do anything for this guy.
Yeah. So
and
wait, we skipped a lot.
Oh yeah. So I got to tell about that meeting.
Yeah.
So this is the best part. So we go to the meeting, and fanboy Ishwar right away starts babbling, and he's looking at him, and he's going like this, and he says, "Could you explain that again? I'm sorry." And so Ishwar explains again. He's like, "One more time, really not getting it." And Ishwar says, "Okay, well, with our ads and the other Android ads and another platform, you can kind of create a lowest common denominator to run across all the platforms, whether it's an Apple phone or a Google phone. The Google phone's coming out." And I was like, that's probably not a good thing to say, right? And I look at Steve, and Steve looks at me. And if that's Ishwar, he just puts his hand up in his face. He looks at me and says, I'm not talking to him again. I've done everything in my life to be anything but the lowest common denominator. How dare you come into my boardroom and say that?
Yeah.
I was like, okay, let's keep talking.
Yeah.
Without you.
Yeah.
Stop talking to Ishwar. And
wow.
And then it took about 3 or 4 hours to get back into it.
Okay.
And then it was one of my better performances. I've definitely had some duds in my life, but I kind of felt like I had nothing to lose at that point, so it was actually kind of freeing.
Yeah.
And I was good, and I was answering his questions. And then I kind of thought I had him because he asked me if I had kids. And then I asked him if he had kids, which I should have known. I didn't know if he had kids, and he got a little choked up because he was dying. And because I said
Oh,
I
wow.
have kids in college, and he was like, I'm not sure if I'm going to see my son graduate. It was sad.
Oh, yeah, no,
It was sad. He weighed like 100 pounds. You know, it was just more energy than I've ever had in my whole life. Even then. And then he looks at me and he says, "How much am I buying your company for?" This is a little known story. I guess I can say it now. It's been so long ago. I said, "We have a deal, $325 million." And he looks over at Peter Oppenheimer, who is the
What
CFO.
did you sell him?
He's like, "What? I'm spending $325 million for Andy's piece of shit company?"
He said that.
And so I'm like, okay, here we go. Is he going to test me as a negotiator, or is he really going to you know? And he said, Peter's like, well, that's what we've negotiated, And he's like, well, I'm not paying that, Andy. I said, well, that's the deal here. He's like, well, I'm not paying it. Your company's not worth that. I said, well, I think we are. And he's like, no, what can we do? I said, I don't really understand. You're asking me to negotiate against myself. He's like, I'll pay you $275. I said, no, like we have a deal, man. He's like, we don't have a deal till I say we have a deal. You understand? I said, fair, but I think you're retrading. And he's like, retrade is a bad word.
Yeah,
right.
Of course,
like there's other words, in our growing up, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, are you calling me a retrader? I said, with all due respect, I think so, because I came in here thinking we had a deal for, I told my board we have a deal for $325 and I'm going to walk out of here at $275. He's like, how about this? He leans in. He's like, come here. He goes, how about you tell your board back in Boston that, oops, Andy's little ads don't work anymore on Apple phones, and then see how good your business is and how much it's worth.
Talk about a flex.
Yeah, and I was like,
oh my God! Imagine that.
Yeah, I was like, $275 sounds pretty good, brother. And he looks at me and goes, can you land this plane? And I was like, aye, Captain. He's like, that makes no sense. That's a boat metaphor.
Yeah.
I remember him saying that. I was like, all right, $275.
What a dick.
I was like, all right. And that was it. Shook his hand. Actually did not shake his hand. Just looked at him. He looked at me. He's like, we're done here. I'll see you around campus. And he said, oh, yeah, by the way, you need to move everybody to Cupertino. I said, I have 150 people who work for me. He's like, yeah, move them all. I was like, we're all from Boston. He's like, no, don't move them all. Leave the bozos back in Boston where they belong. Move the good people out here. I was like, oh, gosh. So that was the deal. That was part of it. That's how I ended up at Apple. I reported to Steve until he died for a couple years, and I learned a ton. Unbelievably stressful. Unbelievable. If I had any hair at the time.
Yeah.
I had a little hair at the time,
Yeah.
actually. A little bit. Gone. I worked my ass off 24 hours a day. I bought a house because I was commuting from Boston right in his neighborhood. As you saw, like I didn't even know he lived there, honestly. And he hated the fact that I lived near him because I was seeing what was happening with his sort of health. And it was all Steve all day, 24 hours a day. Tuesday meeting at 1:30 was it. That was it. Like, it was the scariest time of my life at those Tuesday meetings. I'd meet with him in front of the whole executive team, almost the whole executive team, because he was terrified that ads were going to fuck up his customer, loyalty.
Experience, yeah.
And so he had everybody in there. And every time I won something, I'd try and not bring it in. Oh, and he told me, and this is a good tip for you young entrepreneurs out there, that I was a very complicated man, which is not a compliment, right? His whole world is about simplicity. In fact, right outside of the creative group in Apple, they have this big mural, and it says simplicity, simplify, crossed out, simplify, crossed out, simplify. And that's what it was for him. You had to boil everything down into its essence. And then he didn't even want me to hand stuff for him to read or look at, because then I would kind of frame his thoughts. It was just boil everything down into its essence. I'm going to trust everything you say. The day I don't trust what you say, you're gone. You don't belong in this boardroom anymore. And save me the time so we can make an informed decision. And this is the most amazing executive team. Look what they've done, right? The most valuable company in the world. They've all been there forever. There's no focus groups. Like you always, you say a few. I don't want to, blow sunshine up your ass. Please do. But like you say similar things, right? Like sometimes people don't know what they need until you give it to them, right? And that was his thing as well. I'm not going to have a focus group to tell me what this thing should look like or what color I should have. I'm going to show them, what they don't know. And
Interesting. Anyway, Steve Jobs is a total fucking asshole. Yes, he invented some great products. He clearly destroyed some relationships doing that in the process. But the world is a different place, and would we have as great technology if it weren't for that environment? Maybe not. Next story we're going to talk about, I have been excited to see this video. I haven't pre-watched this one. I think I've seen another video on it, but not this one. Absolutely sick. It is this new, there's something called Dale. This is Dale 2. It's a new version of an AI that is used to paint pictures, or I should say, use existing imagery on the internet to synthesize pictures. So I'll let the video try and do most of the speaking here.
Where I cover anything in science, technology, business, or history. AI is encroaching on many fields that are traditionally run by humans. So far, it's been mostly technical tasks, recognizing CT scans for doctors, predicting oil deposits for engineers, image recognition tasks, and things of that sort. But art is something different, and it's one of the last fields to be encroached upon. Art takes a unique combination of skill, creativity, and the very human element of aesthetic taste. But what if I told you that for the first time, it looks like the visual arts may have also fallen to AI? You all may have heard of the artificial intelligence research group, OpenAI. In April of 2022, they released something special. It's a very powerful text-to-image generator that can draw virtually anything you want. This has been done before, but the real difference here is that the results will almost always be artistically pleasing by design, with correct colors and features that look like the creative judgments of a real artist. In this episode, we'll see exactly what it can do, how it works, and what it means for the world. This is going to be an interesting one. Let's get into it.
You are watching Cold Fusion TV.
So what is it? The new AI system is called DALL-E 2 and is capable of turning any text description into a unique image or work of art that has never been seen before. The technology is based on the GPT-3 text generation system, which we've talked about before. DALL-E 2 is an updated version of DALL-E, which we covered last year. The original DALL-E was limited. It could only render images from text prompts in a cartoonish manner. In contrast, the new DALL-E 2 system generates high-quality, high-resolution images, complete with complex backgrounds, depth of field effects, realistic shadows, shading, and reflections. The resolution is also higher. It also does its job much quicker, only taking about 10 seconds to generate images. It also includes new capabilities, like editing an existing image. So enough chatting, let's see what it can do. Here we have the Instagram artist, Karen Cheng, putting it through its paces.
A girl in a red shirt walking up a staircase. 10 seconds and then it'll generate an image that's brand new.
Ooh.
Okay. That's pretty good. Let me try. Oh, a girl walking up an infinity staircase. Whoa. Oh my god. These are
It's pretty good.
beautiful.
It's pretty good.
Walking up an infinity staircase.
That's
made
pretty fucking cool.
of cookies in the clouds.
Oh.
Oh my god.
This is so sick.
Look at this cookie staircase! Yo, this is like the stuff of dreams, yo.
How sick is this?
So far, some of you might be thinking, so what? It's just smashing random images together. But as we'll see, it's nothing
not.
like that.
It's
When
not.
you think about what's going on here,
Oh,
on a
it's
fundamental
so
level,
not.
It's simply astounding. Let's study a few examples to see what I mean. Look at this example of a dolphin in a spacesuit. How did DALL-E 2 know that that's how a spacesuit on a dolphin would look like? Why did it choose that pose? Why is the lighting coming from that particular direction? Why does the planet have those particular colors? If you really think about it, these are generally the kind of decisions that an artist would make. In this next example, the prompt was to make a Napoleon cat holding cheese. Again, why did the system choose this particular pose? How did it know that these colors would work well in this scene? Look closely at the details in the crease of the suit and pants. It all looks like it was thoughtfully composed. In fact, if you were the manager at a cheese company, you would pay an artist a good amount of money to come up with a concept like this for a poster. In the future, this could be no more. A user could just type in a sentence and there you go, an instantly engaging advertisement. The OpenAI team wrote about this concept and called it filling in the blanks. Quote, unlike a 3D rendering engine whose inputs must be specified unambiguously and in complete detail, DALL-E is often able to fill in the blanks when the caption implies that the image must contain a certain detail that is not explicitly stated. End quote. This is significant because uncertainty isn't something that computers are traditionally good at. Take a look at the rendering of this front garden. It looks almost as good as a photo. Let's take a look at some more examples.
This is gonna change art, you know, when like people start memeing the shit out of this. It's incredible. Incredible. Wow. That's great. That's really good. Okay, these are pretty sick. These are pretty fucking epic, I must say.
Of course, serious artists may find this lacking, but for prototyping and concept art, this kind of power is immense.
100%.
And just to see how far this has come, here is DALL-E 2 compared with the state-of-the-art AI just a year ago. Sometimes the other AIs can do it well, but a lot of the time the images seem kind of muddled. DALL-E 2, in comparison, just seems more well thought out. I think you're probably starting to see how big this is now. A lot of artists on Twitter are starting to show some concern. So how does this work? It just has to be pulling from a dataset somewhere and just smashing objects together, right?
What's up, guys?
Well, no. As you saw, you can type anything and it will create it. There are no specific datasets of raccoons in space or astronauts riding horses. There's no way that it's pulling from data that's predefined. In order to generate these images, the AI has to mimic something akin to creativity and come up with something original. So, how does it do this? Well, it uses two main technologies built by OpenAI. The first is CLIP, a computer vision system, and the second is GPT-3, the language model that can understand and respond to human text. As we've covered in other episodes, it can have conversations, understand context, and compose long passages of original text. It can even read and summarize information for you. Since we've already covered GPT-3 at length, let's take a look at the first component. CLIP stands for Contrastive Language Image Pre-training. The main idea behind CLIP is to pre-train a natural language model and an image classification model simultaneously. It does this by using a lot of labeled images that were extracted from the internet. The CLIP system was able to look at a given image and describe its contents in a way that humans can understand. The OpenAI team essentially reversed that process. Instead of looking at an image and describing its contents, a user would describe the contents and the AI would build it. DALL-E 2 actually generates the image using a process called diffusion, which has been described by the company as starting with a bag of dots and then filling in a pattern with greater and greater detail. Diffusion is the hottest new method of AI generation and can be a whole nother topic for another day. But in order to save time, let's move on to something that I find a lot more interesting: the mimicking of human preference. In order for the image outputs to be pleasing to humans, the OpenAI team simply just modeled what humans would find pleasing and integrated it into the training process. They call this Automated Aesthetic Quality Evaluations. To do this, they generated 512 artistic captions using GPT-3. Next, they trained the system to predict human aesthetic judgment. To do this, they used the AVA dataset, which is a large body of hand-labeled video data. Once trained, the AI will output resulting images that should always look aesthetically pleasing to humans. To me, it seems like this extra layer of mimicking what humans would find pleasing is making all the difference. So why stop there? On this channel, we've already seen AI induce motion in still images before. So, why not add another layer that turns these images into short video animations? In fact, when you think about it, the possibilities with a system like this are almost endless.
Well, especially when you stack on, what was that, we were talking about this last week's talk. NVIDIA has that technology that can basically A, generate faces, and then B, add animation to them. And it's also applicable to just like being able to like, hey, here's a picture of something now, like approximate some kind of animation on it or expressions on the face or whatever. By the way, I'm lining up something very fun for us. We're going to do the Superman city demo on Unreal Engine 5. It's going to be very cool shortly here. So we'll finish this off and then get into some cool shit. Cooler shit.
So when saying all of this, DALL-E 2 is far from perfect though. Sometimes it just gets things plain wrong. Give it the instruction, a red cube on top of a blue cube, and it will sometimes mix up the order. Okay, so the comment section must be exploding right now. A lot of people would have this next question on their mind. What about nefarious users? Couldn't someone use this system to make a fake photo of a famous person doing a criminal act?
A lot.
Or produce generally unsavory material?
A lot.
Well, OpenAI has thought of this and has implemented some built-in safeguards. The model was trained on data that had objectionable material removed, so there's a good chance that the system would struggle to produce anything objectionable anyway. Users are banned from uploading or generating images that are, quote, not G-rated and, quote, could cause harm. Nudity, obscene gestures, or, quote, events related to major ongoing political events are all banned. Additionally, the system actively prevents users from creating pictures based on specific names, so images of celebrities, public figures, and political leaders should be impossible. OpenAI research scientist Prafulla Dhariwal states, quote, our hope is to keep doing a staged process here, so we can keep evaluating from the feedback we get on how to release this technology safely. Understandably, DALL-E 2 is an extremely powerful technology, so OpenAI is only sharing the software with what it describes as a select, screened group of beta testers. Even though OpenAI isn't releasing the model to the public, developers can look at their technical findings in their published papers and update their own work. In a technical sense, this makes sense. The AI research community is broadly still trying to figure out what works best. OpenAI is basically telling the research community, hey, we found that this method seems to work extremely well. This might be the direction that AI research should go in. Researchers can sign up online and preview the system. OpenAI hopes to later make the system available for third-party apps. Looking at their longer-term goals, Alex Nicol, one of the OpenAI researchers who worked on the project, says, quote, we hope tools like this democratize the ability for people to create whatever they want. He says that the tool could be a useful product for designers, magazine cover designers, and artists, either for use in inspiration and brainstorming, or to actually create finished works. Ilya Sutskever, OpenAI's co-founder and chief scientist.
Imagine you could have an AI help you write a book. You know, it's like, I have an idea, it's a book about this, I want this tone, blah, blah, blah. And like the AI would just chip away at the book for you until it's like, hey, here's the book that you wrote. Like, we're not that far off from that.
DALL-E 2 was an important step towards OpenAI's goal of creating Artificial General Intelligence, or AGI. AGI is a piece of software that can achieve or exceed human performance in a wide range of tasks. AGI would need to process multimodal conceptual understanding, being able to associate a word with an image or a set of images, and vice versa. He states that DALL-E 2 is an attempt to create an AI with this sort of understanding. For those of you who are interested and want to tinker with DALL-E 2, I'll leave a link to the waitlist in the description below.
We're joining that. There is a waitlist, and we are gonna do this over here. Okay. And while I'm doing that, I am actually... We'll finish this video, and then we get
And
the
to be
fun
clear,
shit coming
this
up here.
episode was not sponsored. So in conclusion, only about 5 years ago, the idea that an AI could create art from scratch was radical. At that time, when we looked at it on this channel, most of you and me were both very impressed. But since then, the technology has absolutely skyrocketed. It's no longer a cute novelty. It's grown up into something that's starting to catch people off guard. In the following year, it will be twice as good, and then the year after, 4 times as good. Soon, when we see custom animations generated only by a text prompt, people's minds will be blown once again. Right now and in the future, we'll be asking ourselves, will this technology make artists more powerful? Or will it slowly chip away at their domain? In fact, what is art? Is this still art if all the human involvement during the creative process is no more? If the human creative process is gone and a machine can mimic it just as well, what is true creativity anyway? It's enough to make your head spin, but I'm going to pass it off to you for now. How does this make you feel? Do you think that this development is something really interesting? Do you see spots of opportunity? Or are you completely terrified by this? Feel free to leave a comment below. I'd be interested to see how your opinions range.
I'm terrified. Like, a lot of auto technology, like, we were scared about meeting strangers off the internet or buying things offline, or online, I should say. And yes, there will need to be safeguards and different things to prevent, like, abuse in certain areas, but man, it's pretty cool shit. Okay, we're gonna move into something a little bit more fun, a little bit more, well, at least interactive for me, a little demo here. So I recently got my hands on this Unreal Engine demo, where essentially, I think it's based off of the Matrix demo, and essentially I get to be Superman, the Superman flight experience. It was blah, 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 blah. Okay. Let's try the optimized city and see what that looks like. It gets a little glitchy in the beginning, but it's very impressive. Like, the level of detail when you walk up to things, like, lighting is really good. The surfaces are fucking sick. Objects are, like, crazy photorealistic. Like, I don't know. Wow. Okay, here we go. Wow. Wow. This is actually extremely sick. Holy fuck. Like, I don't know about, like, the lighting on, like, the rooftops of the buildings is really well done. Like, I wonder how far out I can fly here. Okay, this is pretty cool. Okay, I get it. So this is when they say optimized city, it's quite literally, I think it's just like a city on the water. The other one is like a legit city. A little janky graphics wise, but it's not like it looks fucking sick. Okay. Controls. I don't want controls tutorial. I just want the simple controls guide. Hero landing, takeoff, change flight, dodge, aiming, toggle, movement. The way to close this that I know of is literally just like shut it down. So let's start over. Let's do the Matrix City. I think that one's a little bit more intense, like computationally, but a little bit more exciting in terms of the stuff out there. So what's important to like highlight here is the underlying engine obviously has had an enormous number of optimizations, but it just unlocks so much potential. This is very like reminds me very much of like Spider-Man on PS4, PS5. Oh, okay. Are you guys seeing it? Like this is a city. This is a mega city. Can we go over here? Let's see if we can fly over this way. Tell me I can fly over here. You gotta be kidding me. That's insane. Oh my god, it's all... You can visit all of this, I guess. This is incredible. Oh, so this stuff you can fly through, I guess? Oh, I see. This is all like, I assume these different cities maybe have different like levels of detail. I'm assuming this one is just very low on the detail end. The lighting of the character is pretty great too. Like the way his cape gets lit so dynamically, depending on where the sun is. It's really fucking good. Yo, good for my computer for keeping up with this, but like... Getting pretty decent frames, and it's not chugging too terribly. Yo, this is absolutely sick. If you guys have a computer that can run this, for those of you who are in on the club, I'll throw it on the NAS, and you can just grab it from there. I think it's 17 gigs. Oh my god, it's so sick. It's really fun just to like fly around and like explore this city. And I mean, it's, yeah, there's a little bit of like jitter and whatnot when you're going like super fast, but considering the level of detail that it's able to maintain, it looks so good. Interesting how you can see like the level of detail. There's like this weird dithering around the character. But, oh man, so sick. The coolest. Okay. Let's switch gears here. We're going to jump into something a little bit different. That was super fun though. Thank you for my friend, friend of the stream, friend of the family, I don't know if he's around anymore, but he's like Rinko Stars. Yeah, Rinko Star. I get it now. Now saying it out loud, I get it. I fucking get it. Of course, that would be his name. All right, cool. So there was. I don't know if any of the guys in the chat have had a chance to get acclimated to this really, really interesting guy named CoffeeZilla. He is an amazing YouTuber who actually produces like really, really good content. It's a little memey. It's funny. There's moments of cringe. But he does a really, really interesting job of like looking at a lot of the scams and bullshit that's going on in the crypto space, interviewing some of the players, even some of the like the really bad actors. One thing to get you guys interested, because I think people really like hate watching some stuff too, is we're gonna start with this video. It's a couple months ago of this guy Ice Poseidon who started a coin. And I'll let the video speak for itself, but I thought that I'd start introducing folks on the stream to CoffeeZilla and get their vibe. I'd be super curious to hear what you guys think about him. If you don't, if you don't already, if you're not already familiar with his said content.
Live streamer Ice Poseidon just scammed his followers for up to $500,000, and I'm going to prove it. He personally profited $300,000 by stealing money out of a crypto scheme that he set up. And when I confronted Ice Poseidon, who's better known by his real name Paul Danino, about this scam, he was shockingly honest.
You want to keep the money that's not yours, that you took from the project, even though you failed to deliver.
I mean, I'm not really sure what you want me to say, but yeah.
I'm trying to like get you to return the money because it's 100% still available and you could do that.
Yeah, I could give the money back. It is within my power. But I'm going to look out for myself and not do that. I don't like know what else to say. That's just the most honest answer.
Now, these influencer scams are becoming more and more common, in part because of how easy they are to pull off. Ice Poseidon's scheme apparently took him only 2 weeks of work to set up before he apparently got bored with the project and decided to stop working on it and just took the money.
Like, seriously, how long did you work? I'm just curious.
Well, like you said, it was a fork, so, I don't know, a couple weeks.
Couple weeks, $300,000. That's a nice chunk of change.
Now, I pleaded with Paul, or Ice Poseidon, to return the money that he stole, in part appealing to the guilt that he was taking money from his fans who were all much worse off than him. Ice Poseidon's response was that he didn't like how that made him sound.
I don't know if you're aware of the fact that your average fan has way less money than you. So you're just taking from poor people. Like, you understand that, right?
That is definitely not... That is not a good way to put it. That's a pretty shitty way to put it, my dude.
I think it's a pretty shitty thing to do.
From the very beginning, this story shocked me, but especially the twist at the end that I can't tell you about yet. But what I can tell you is that this is my most in-depth investigation yet into influencer greed, cryptocurrencies gone wrong, and the blockchain. Now, I know it's been a while, so let me remind you, this is the $10 Million Studio. I'm your host, CoffeeZilla, the internet detective, and well, it's good to be back.
He's got a really cool vibe. He started off just like talking in front of like a bar with like coffee mugs or some shit behind him, and would do these kind of like investigations, and has since gone a little bit more in a production direction. I love his stuff. What I will say is he does a really good job of going through a lot of crypto scams, a lot of influencer scams, and documenting their like publicly known wallets. And being able to use that information to essentially show people, it's like, see, we can prove it. It's right there. This is something that I don't think a lot of people understand or a lot of people think about when they are adopting things like blockchain technology, Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc. All of the information is public record. The only way that you can obfuscate that money is by having it go to a wallet that somehow isn't tied to you, and you can really never send money between those wallets, because then you create said connection where people can do some line drawing. But anyway, Coffee does a great job of said line drawing and helping us see the wallets and where things go, and unpacking the insanity of some of these scams.
In order to understand what happened with Ice Poseidon, we have to rewind the clocks back. The story started when Ice Poseidon first got into crypto.
I invest in a lot of the like shit coin, like a lot of the you put money in and then you sell in like 20 minutes when it pumps.
Ice Poseidon first got into crypto just buying a lot of meme coins. But like many influencers, he quickly realized gambling on another person's coin is a sucker's game. The fast, easy money is actually in getting other people to gamble on your coin. Now this moment is important. It's the moment Ice Poseidon realized what a gold mine it could be to start his own scam.
You're telling me I could create a CX coin and then people could buy it because I could say that the community is super strong and then I could sell it in 10 seconds and make $10 million. What the f am I doing?
Ice Poseidon would later say that the clip you just watched was a joke and that the idea of him scamming his fans was just a bit he played up for the audience. But that core idea that he was missing out on a huge opportunity to make a ton of money was real, and it nagged at him. And pretty soon, he decided to start his own coin.
CX Coin is the one to choose. I'm the founder of CX Coin. My name's Paul Zanino, and I decided to make a community-driven token that I'm personally going to be a part of.
Now, almost immediately, this got a lot of attention. Obviously, given his past comments about sort of scamming people were understandably skeptical of this. And it came out right after Save the Kids, and you would have thought that myself and other people like Mutahar would have talked about this whole thing, but Ice Poseidon was working incredibly hard behind the scenes, which is something I need you guys to understand. He was contacting people like myself and pleading with us that he was just joking back then, and he was serious about this coin. He wasn't about to pull off a scam like Save the Kids. He was different. He even mentioned in live streams that Save the Kids was going to make what he was about to do much harder.
I know about the phase coin, Steezy. That's why I'm trying my best to be as transparent as possible. I've been working on this for like a month now, and I wasn't going to let that drama stop me, but it definitely makes it a little bit more difficult.
Ice Poseidon repeatedly told skeptics that he couldn't rug this coin if he wanted to. He had locked all his money up in a smart contract. He told me that in DMs. He said, "Don't worry, no rug here. All the money is locked." Lol. And look, I have to admit, I was busy at the time with some other investigations, and I gave him the benefit of the doubt, something that I obviously regret now. But periodically, I would hear, complaints from his community that they thought something was off, but every time I'd go to Ice, he would immediately respond. Immediately. And he always gave me something that sort of sounded reasonable, and I later learned he was doing the same thing with everyone who said something negative about CX Coin. In fact, he got a Dexerto article killed about CX Coin being a scam. I mean, I even asked him about this at the time, and he said this: Dexerto article went up and then down? Did you see that? Yeah. I emailed Dex proof I wasn't scamming. So leaving that up, quoting a Twitter with 2 likes is a bit unfair to me. The point I'm trying to make is he was playing the PR game hard, telling everybody he was different. He even gave me his wallet addresses and told me to hold him accountable. He wasn't going to do anything shady. And everyone sort of felt like, okay, maybe he's doing something different. Maybe everything he's been saying was, just a joke.
Because, dude, if I see $1 million, I'm selling. I don't give a f. I'm not gonna be like, I'll hold for you guys, bro. I see $1 million in my portfolio, I'm out.
Not gonna lie. That looks bad, but I'm gonna be really generous here.
That looks
give
bad.
Ice the benefit of the doubt. That clip probably was a joke, and it was probably made before he was actually thinking about making CX Coin into a real thing.
Now, as time moved on, I and many other people sort of forgot about CX Coin until January, when I decided to take a break for a little while. And while I was off, I couldn't help but feel that there was something else going on. I just had a hunch I had to look back. So with my free time, I joined the CX Coin Telegram and started tracing back the wallets that Ice Poseidon had given me so transparently. And pretty soon I found out that, well, he gave me the wrong crypto wallet. Whoops. He gave me the DXSale wallet instead of his personal wallet, which didn't tell me anything. For example, one of those things he didn't tell me was the fact that he took out $200,000 from the liquidity pool at the very beginning, which is directly at odds with what Ice Poseidon told me himself when I asked. He said, "Don't worry, all the money is locked up, except for $200,000, I guess." But it also hid another story, which was the misappropriation of the so-called marketing wallet. Now, according to CX Coin's own white paper, the marketing wallet was to be used exclusively to, quote, fund marketing campaigns in the cryptocurrency market. But in the Telegram, there was another story going on. Ice Poseidon was complaining that he had spent money on an ad campaign and it just hadn't helped. Quote, we spent 53K on a BTOC and it hasn't really helped. The wallet is limited. He berated people who complained. You want me to spend 30K on stuff that doesn't help? Or you want me to think about the best ways to use marketing money? Exactly. You can't use the marketing money on, well, you know, marketing. Instead, the money seemed to go somewhere else. Shortly after this coin launched, Ice Poseidon bought himself a brand new Tesla. This video was published July 24th, and as he says, he bought it a week ago, putting it right around the time that he launched the coin and realized he had suddenly gotten a lot of money to his name. But I'm sure all that money is locked up, right? Apparently not. And here's
Not
the
quite.
interesting thing.
Not quite.
The longer things went on, Ice Poseidon just sort of gotten more and more brazen with the way he used the money, right? At first, it was just sort of sitting around. Then he started sending it to cash out wallets. And eventually I calculated that there's roughly $250,000 missing from that marketing wallet. But that's not all. Ice Poseidon had tricked his followers at this point by getting them to buy into a vision of a long-term project. The whole idea was that this was going to be a donation platform for streamers and that it would take a while to build. He kept reiterating this again and again.
I mean, this is a long-term project. I'm trying to, you know, we're making a donation platform, so I'm going to put that on my stream, and this coin will just be around for the entirety of my streams.
He said this a lot in the Telegram too. You know this is long-term, right? Thanks, guys. I assume everyone is in it for the long haul. Anyone who invests in something should know this was a long-term project, so 1 week is not going to see results. Now, later, I would find out this was a lie. Ice Poseidon did not see this as a long-term project. He actually gave up after 2 weeks. But I think I'm getting a little ahead of myself. The point is, Ice was getting brazen. He was increasingly intolerant of people who called him a scammer, saying they just hadn't done their research. He even brought my name into it, saying he had talked to CoffeeZilla, maybe implying that I had cleared him.
And I've talked to these fucking people, CoffeeZilla. I've talked to these guys. I showed them the coin. I showed them everything. And, you know, they're giving me the benefit of the doubt. So obviously they would call me out if it was a scam.
Nice
I'm gonna be
move.
honest, this really pissed me off. Ice Poseidon was using my name to try to imply that he was legit, when in actuality, he had just fed me false information about his coin and begged me not to talk about it. But amazingly, the final piece of this puzzle wouldn't fall into place until a few days ago. As I said, Ice had been getting more and more bold, thinking, I guess, that he had gotten away with this. And on January 22nd, 2022, using his wallet that he didn't tell me about, he drained the liquidity pool, essentially killing his own coin and taking the money from his investors. To be specific, he drained about 90% of the funds, which is about $300,000. Now, for important context, liquidity pools are how you get money out of crypto, right? You can't just cash out a coin like CX coin, right? You can't buy groceries with it. Someone has to be willing to trade you that coin for something that, you know, sort of has value. So coins like this rely on something called liquidity pools, a big sort of pot of money. And what Ice Poseidon did, using the fact that he created this coin, he rug pulled 90% of that from his community, which meant that that's $300,000 that his investors would not
insane.
be able to get back out. And at
Jesus
this point,
Christ.
I simply had had enough. This was a scam. He had lied to me from the beginning, and he had lied to others about it, and I wanted to confront him, but I couldn't let him know that I knew anything. Otherwise, he wouldn't pick up the call. So I simply told him I wanted to chat, and to my surprise, he agreed. And so on the 26th of January, we had the call you're about to see. And
This
to
is-
remind you,
this is so
expecting him sort of
good.
to deny everything, like who would take credit for this? Well, Ice would, I guess.
It looks like the coin got rugged. You know anything about that?
I mean, yeah. I mean, not rugged, but I mean,
Well, someone pulled all the liquidity out. That's a rug, right?
that would be a rug, yes. But there is still liquidity in there.
40K got left and 300K got ripped out, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that is exactly
Wow.
what happened.
Wow.
Right. Are you laughing? I mean, is that funny?
I mean, no.
You're hearing this right. He's admitting he took out 90% of the money, but that's not a rug pull, apparently. He had to do it after all. The crypto markets were crashing, and if he didn't take out the money, who would?
The crypto market is crashing, and $300,000 is in there. There's two options, right? leave the money in there, and then if BNB goes down to like $100, the money goes to shit anyways, or I could take it and the money is not just going to dust.
The
And
money
I
would
still,
have,
and I
the money
still
would have
keep-
never gone to dust. I mean, it just would go back to the investors when they sold out, when you told them, hey guys, I'm no longer interested in this project. I wipe my hands
so
of it.
fucked
You know,
up.
You got
It's
your
so
50K in, you got your 50K
his
out, you're
perspective.
good, right? You didn't
I
deliver.
hate Ice
This is not
Poseidon
your money.
so
I
much.
can't believe you keep thinking of it as your money that's going away. That's your investors' money, and it should be their decision what they do with it.
Okay, I mean, that's a fair point.
That's a fair point. Yet, despite
It's not the
all
way
these
he
fair
sees it
points
at all.
I kept making, every time Ice got cornered about the fact that he was basically stealing from his investors, he slowly pivoted his language from, oh, this isn't a rug pull, to more like, well, the investors deserved it. He said, they believe too much in his project and his word.
They're, like, part of the responsibility is on them as well for being, you know, like putting too much emotion into it.
Now, look, I want to be clear. I agree that investing in any influencer coin is idiotic, but the logic here seems to be insane. They believed me, so it's okay I scammed them? I asked Ice about this.
I don't know if you're trying to say they deserve it. You're saying they owe some responsibility. I agree they owe some responsibility, but do they deserve to get ripped off?
No, I mean, nobody deserves that.
It's just
I mean,
what
I don't-
happened, though.
Like I said, sometimes you have to look out for yourself. I don't really know how else you want me to put it. I mean, you could say it in all these different ways to make it sound as horrible as possible. And you know what? I can agree with you on some of those things. I just don't like to put it in those specific ways because it makes it sound like that was the intention from the start, which it wasn't.
Oh
And there it is, the final refuge of every scammer. I started with good intentions. I meant to do the right thing. But I kept reminding Ice Poseidon or Paul or whatever, like his excuses made no sense because it wasn't as if the money was gone. It wasn't as if it had vanished. He still had it and could return it at any point. He doesn't have to go down as the scammer.
So I don't know why you're
But
acting like
he,
you passed it.
but he has the money and he wants to keep it. That's it's like but I have it. Like, why would I give it? It's kind of like that Jaden Smith skit.
With like you being the bad guy here. That's not what I'm trying to do at all. I'm trying to
hold
get
on.
you to return the money because it's 100% still available and you could do that. So that's what I'm not understanding is I want to get to that point. I don't think we're going to get there.
If you want the answer, yeah, I could give the money back. It is within my power. But I'm going to look out for myself and not do that. I don't like know what else to say. That's just the most honest answer.
Now, I do believe he's being honest here. I believe this is the most mask-off anybody's ever been on my channel. Most of the time when you get these guys on the phone, they just try to deflect and dodge. I don't think that's happening here. Ice is being 100% transparent, and I realized it was a unique opportunity to get the full story of how these scams work.
Sorry, this is the middle of the skip, and this is basically Ice Poseidon.
Blah, 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 blah. Fast forward, at the heart of the story, Tony has to choose between his mom. Choose. Yeah, choose is when you have to make a decision between two things you want, but you can have only one.
But there's two.
Yeah, but I mean, he can't have both.
What'd I say about science fiction, Clyde? It's
It's kind of same line of thinking. Oh shit, where was this? There.
Ice Poseidon proceeded to walk me through the details on exactly how long it takes to whip up an influencer scam like this and the profits you can expect from it.
Can you tell me how much money you made off this? I'll just call it a scam. I know you don't want to call it a scam, but it is a scam. So what did you make off this?
Well, I got 55%, and then 45% went to my developers. So I don't know, probably like 300,000.
Nice. What a good profit from doing. I mean, how long did you work on this project? Like seriously, how long did you work? I'm just curious.
Well, like you said, it was a fork, so I don't know, a couple weeks.
What do you plan to do with the money?
Invest into crypto, Ethereum, mainly.
Well, there you have it. For 2 weeks of work, forking someone else's program, you can get $300,000, which annualized is a pay rate of $7.8 million per year if he would just scam every 2 weeks.
You also need to be a piece of shit like Ice Poseidon and have like a following and have people to scam. Like I have a coin, we have Doink Coin. I could mint trucker coin if I wanted to, but it's worthless if I can't get distribution, if I can't market it, and if we can't get people talking about it. So that's why influencers are a particularly good sort of foot in the door for getting this stuff out there.
It's not hard to see the appeal, obviously, but what blew my mind is that he hadn't gotten away with this. Like, he got caught red-handed, and somehow, I guess I was just expecting him to go, oh, well, okay, I guess I'll return the money now. But no, he just kept doubling down.
You are deciding to do the shitty thing. You know that, and you're still doubling down.
I am doubling down. Do you not agree, though, some of the responsibility is on people who, if you're still holding something that's inactive for months, like, sure, okay, maybe they, you know, have faith in me, whatever, but that's not a good...
That's your fans, dude. That's your fans. These are people who followed you since they were kids. They admire you. They look up to you. That's the
He
people
doesn't give a
who are
fuck about
that's
them.
involved.
I honestly
It's so
couldn't believe what
clear.
he was saying here. Not that he didn't care. You know, I'm kind of used to that. But he clearly expects zero consequences for his actions, right? And this made me think that at least part of the reason for this might be because stories like Save the Kids, which got huge press, ultimately nothing happened. Don't get me wrong, it's important to get these stories out there anyway. But you have to understand the inner workings of the greedy influencer. When you don't have law enforcement consequences for what is essentially theft and fraud, you end up with people like Ice Poseidon realizing they can do the same without consequence. And I'm not merely speculating here. This clip you're about to watch is of Ice Poseidon discussing with his partner, Moises, what happened to Sam Pepper, one of the leaders of Save the Kid. They don't talk as if he's a cautionary tale, but instead as if Sam Pepper had won, as if Sam Pepper had beat the system. He stole money, and he got away with it.
I mean, I did watch that Coffee's Hill video. I think Sam's a fucking millionaire now. So I think he still succeeded me, although he got it in a very poor way. He made up like a bandit, bro.
Sam's probably a fucking lower life. Probably has like...
These guys are such douchebags. It's insane.
The dude broke his lease.
If you got a yeah.
Tesla, the dude paid like, what was it, 10 stacks to break his lease.
I don't know. Yeah, if you're breaking your lease and leaving the country, I mean, you
made it. You flew first class.
I mean,
to Europe.
if he really felt the need to do all that, then he probably made plenty of money.
I heard
Sam Pepper scammed people, but because he did it without going to jail, he's successful. He got away with it. That's how these people think. So is it any wonder when Ice Poseidon is caught also stealing money, his response is, oh, well, I'm just going to look out for number one. It's their fault for getting scammed. They shouldn't have believed me. He's just so obviously not afraid of getting caught. And why would he? In fact, I asked him about this fact, whether these things should be prosecuted, and he seemed to think that this was a wild idea.
Do you think the FBI should get involved with cases like this, or like the SEC, or do you think like people like you should be prosecuted?
No.
I can't say this enough. These guys aren't scared. They think they can do whatever they want. They'll just fork a coin, take $300,000, another $200,000, another $250K, and walk away. And screw you. What are you going to do about it? Oh, and by the way, in case you thought that this was just a matter of Ice Poseidon messing up once, I actually found old clips of him admitting to what seems to be some kind of credit card phishing scam.
I fished credit cards back when I was younger, dude. I didn't do anything with the credit cards because I was like afraid of going to jail.
But that time he didn't go through with it because he was afraid of the consequences. Well, that was then and this was now, and now he's not scared anymore. Ultimately, this whole conversation between me and Ice ended with us just sort of going in circles. Me pointing out that what he was doing was ethically wrong, him telling me that he agreed, but he essentially doesn't care. And I felt sort of like a failure afterwards, to be honest. I didn't achieve my goal of having Ice Poseidon return the money to his victims. However, a few hours afterwards, Ice Poseidon DM'd me one last time. He told me he wasn't going to give all the money back, but he was planning to give a little bit of it back.
Oh, that's so nice.
Now, I want to be clear about this. Giving back $155,000 is better than nothing. Good for the investors who hopefully will withdraw their money as soon as watching this video. But it's so obviously a last-minute Hail Mary for whatever is left of his reputation. It's kind of pathetic. I mean, to be clear, he's still keeping the bulk of the money. He knows that, and he knows that we know that. Remember, this still leaves him with taking $200,000 from the project at the start, another $250,000 from the marketing wallet, which went basically nowhere, and then $300,000 from the liquidity pool, of which he's saying, okay, I'll return $155,000. I don't know what this is supposed to demonstrate. Are people supposed to all of a sudden applaud as he gives a small fraction of what he took? Except, wait a minute, I just checked. Ice Poseidon doesn't even seem like he can do that much. After DMing me, I went to the Telegram, and his admin updated everyone and said, we just finished a buyback of over 120 BNB rocket emoji, which is not $155,000. It's only $40,000. Now, whether Ice Poseidon has actual plans to put the rest in, or, oh my gosh, return the full amount, I really doubt it. It's just amazing to see that Ice seems to be doing this only because he got caught, sort of got interrogated for 30 minutes, and faces reputational damage, yet he still can't muster the moral courage, or at least fear, to return the small fraction of money he promised. And so to close this, look, I'll be honest, in my opinion, Ice Poseidon is not a good person. I don't think he regrets anything or feels bad about any of this. And I think the unfortunate conclusion many other influencers will come to when looking at this is that Ice, like Sam Pepper, has finally made it. He's succeeded in the influencer game. He's gotten away with it. Or has he? There may still be ways to prevent stuff like this from happening. There are two things you can really do. Number one, you can share this video so more people become aware of what Ice did and get more eyeballs on it. But two, if anyone was scammed by CX Coin and lost money, they can report their losses to ic3.gov, link below. This is the FBI submission portal if you've been defrauded or wronged. And if enough people report things like this, there's a chance people will be brought to justice. I just hope it happens sooner than later. That way I'll stop hearing about how influencers like Sam Pepper made it. Until then, all I can do is report, dig, and investigate. That's all for now. I'm CoffeeZilla. Thanks for watching.
Great content. Great content. He actually just did another video recently. I like his newest one is pretty good. I just watched it earlier today. Phenomenal investigations. Really cool stuff. Guys, I think that's where we're going to call it tonight. It's going to be just to be honest with you, I was super tired today. Very, very exhausted. Work is kind of a nightmare. Drowning in work. So, going to be a quick one. We're going to call it short. But definitely come back next week because we got some cool stuff to talk about. I'm working on an interesting demo. I don't want to say much about it until I actually have it working, but it's kind of a cool demo. I want to have it working. It's going to be very sick, and I'm looking forward to showing you guys what I've been working on. But anyway, for now, thank you so much for the guys who stuck around, or the gals, the NBs, dudes, dudettes, Denbies. I am the son of Moog. I appreciate you guys coming out as always, and please keep looking at the stars. Catch you guys later.